This is Eyewitness News Up Close.
I spent the first 18 years of my life in apartment 2C right here.
He was born in New York and still has that distinct Brooklyn accent.
For me, it's great being back in New York.
She calls New York her adopted home and spent 8 years representing the state in the U.S. Senate.
It's great to be home. This is home. It's great to be home.
And he spent his entire life in New York, reconfiguring the skyline with his buildings. A distinctly New York feel to this presidential election 2016, and for the first time in decades, the votes of New Yorkers could help determine who will call the White House home starting next January.
We are competing hard in New York.
This is like being so alive, being in New York.
And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the special edition of Up Close. I'm Bill Ritter. The eyes of the political world now on the Empire State. That hasn't happened in a presidential primary here in the past 40 years. And the candidates, with the nod to Billy Joel, well, they're in a New York state of mind. And why not? New York, the second biggest prize left in the fight for delegates. Only California has more at stake. Polls now show the national frontrunners ahead here as well in New York. On the Republican side, Donald Trump has maintained a large lead over both John Kasich and Ted Cruz, well over 50% of the vote. In just a few moments, we will speak with Governor Kasich. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, all of the recent polls show that Hillary Clinton leads Bernie Sanders here by double digits of varying amounts, but the national polls are getting tighter. New York Mayor and Hillary Clinton supporter Bill de Blasio is joining me in studio in a few minutes. But before we get to the mayor, our political reporter Dave Evans sat down one-on-one with Secretary Clinton as she makes her pitch to New Yorkers ahead of Tuesday's primary.
People of New York took a chance on me twice in 2000 and 2006 when they elected me senator. They voted for me in very large numbers. I just feel so committed to this state, and obviously I want to do well, but more than that, I want to make it clear they've had my back. I'm going to have New York's.
You feel confident?
I feel good. I feel good, but I never make predictions, and I never like to feel that it's over before it's over, because it's not.
His main critique, I think, of you, especially last night, was how can you be an agent of change to reform Wall Street and the banking industry in America when so many of your contributions come from that industry?
You know, it's such a strange critique. And of course, yesterday, when pressed by the moderator, he could not come up with a single instance that in any way could be traced to any contribution, because I've never been influenced by any contribution of any kind. But think about this, Dave. Barack Obama took more money from Wall Street in 2008 than anybody who'd ever run for president before. Did that stop him from passing the Dodd-Frank law, which is the toughest set of regulations we've had since the Great Depression? Of course not. And so the argument just doesn't hold water. When I was a senator from New York, I criticized practices of Wall Street. And I have a record of not just doing that when I was senator, but the plan I've put forward is the strongest of anybody's. And I thought it was very telling when Senator Sanders was interviewed at length by the New York Daily News. The core of his campaign is about breaking up the big banks. He could not even answer questions. I've studied the legislation. I've said for a year, here's what we have to do to make it work. I will break up the banks if they pose a risk to our economy. I have said repeatedly, I'm going to appoint the toughest regulators that are going to hold Wall Street's feet to the fire. But I want to go further. And Senator Sanders has never understood this, or at least has never agreed. You know, we've got to go after hedge funds and big insurance companies and mortgage companies if they pose a systemic threat to our economy. That's why Paul Krugman and others, including Barney Frank, have said that I have the best plan, and that's why they endorsed, why Barney Frank endorsed me.
Do you think it's unfair for you when people say they think you're qualified, but they think you're dishonest?
Well, I think it's really regrettable. The people of New York voted for me twice. They counted on me. They trusted me for good reason, because I worked my heart out for New York, and I would do so again as president. I ran a really hard campaign against Barack Obama. He turned around and asked me to be Secretary of State. So people who know me, people I've represented, people I've worked with, they don't understand this. This seems to be kind of in the atmosphere every time I run for something. When I have a job, I get really high approval ratings. I get very good marks for working with Republicans. But when I run for something, oh my gosh, they pile on. And I just keep forging ahead because I know once I get the job, people will once again say, hey, she's really working hard, she's producing results.
The difference between this race and 2008 Ireland's here in the last week, it's nastier. Do you?
Well, I have really been somewhat surprised to see the kinds of things that the Sanders campaign is saying and implying, going up to the edge, making all these, insinuations, but then trying to disown them. And some of the people that are his surrogates have been, not just, attacking me. They attack anybody who supports me, which I find really beyond the pale. They can run their campaign however they wish. Sanders repeatedly said, I've never run a negative campaign. Well, he needs to look around him. He needs to listen to the people who talk before he gets on at his rallies and hear what they say.
You think he's been negative?
Well, I think he has played along with the negativity that you find in his campaign. That doesn't matter. Look, what matters is we've tried to stay on the issues. I've tried to put forth very specific plans. I'm used to being attacked. What I want New Yorkers to know is what I will do. It's not enough to diagnose the problem. We all know what the problems are. Too much inequality, not just in the economy, but in education, in healthcare, in the criminal justice system, in discrimination against not just women, but LGBT community, people with disabilities, so much more. Now, it's okay to diagnose the problems, but that's not enough. You also have to have solutions for the problems.
You don't think he has the solution?
Well, I haven't heard them, and that long interview with the New York Daily News, I think, was really revealing. And of course, at the end of it, they got to go at both of us for more than an hour. They listened to him, they listened to me, they endorsed me because even they were shocked. He couldn't answer basic questions. He just keeps diagnosing the problem.
Do you think he's unqualified?
Look, I've said I will take him over Bernie Sanders, I'll take Bernie Sanders over Donald Trump or Ted Cruz any day, and I mean that.
One more thing, on the $15 minimum an hour wage.
Right.
I didn't think you supported that federally, but last night it seemed like you said that you do support that as a federal minimum wage.
No, I support the $15 minimum wage wherever it can be passed in the state and local governments. But when I was asked if a Democratic Congress passed it, would I sign it? Of course the answer is yes. Our problem is if we still have a Republican Congress, we've got to get an increase from where we are, which is $7.25 an hour, and we've got to get it to where I think it can be attracting Republican support, namely $12. But I want everybody to go above that if they can to get to 15.
Are you already prepping for the likelihood we're going to see 2 New Yorkers in the general election this fall?
I'm excited about campaigning in New York again. I love being here, Dave. You covered me back in the day. I love traveling around the city. You and I are talking today in the Corsi Senior Center here in East Harlem. The energy, the resilience of people here in this city and state is just so incredibly uplifting for me. So I'm going to be campaigning hard no matter who the Republicans nominate.
One other question here, kind of a personal question. I love little kids.
I'm so glad. I do too.
I know you have a new granddaughter.
I know.
Relatively new.
Yes, 18 months.
Charlotte. What does she call you?
Grandma.
And what does she call Bill Clinton?
Pop, pop.
How did we just get to...
I have no idea where it came from. My daughter doesn't really. Out of the blue one day, she goes, Grandma, pop, pop. And she sees us as a matched pair. So if one of us shows up without the other, she'll greet the one that's there. She'll go, Grandma, and then she'll start looking around, pop, pop, or vice versa. And when we do FaceTime, which was invented for grandparents, she does exactly the same thing. And we're going to have another little baby in the summer, so we couldn't be happier.
Relishing family life usually trumps politics, right? Speaking of politics, Secretary Clinton may have the delegate lead, but Senator Sanders has some momentum. He's won the last 8 out of 9 contests, mostly in states out west. But it was here in New York that Senator Sanders stepped up his attacks against Mrs. Clinton, challenging everything from her qualifications to her ties to Wall Street. The senator joined us earlier this morning on Eyewitness News.
I am talking to the issues that impact working families, the need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, the need to make public colleges and universities tuition-free, the need to pass paid family and medical leave, the need to vigorously combat climate change and transform our energy system. When you're out leading and people respond on those issues, the need to demand the wealthy on Wall Street start paying their fair share of taxes. When your people respond, then other candidates have to follow you. Where I would say to the African American community, look at my record, look at our agenda on criminal justice issues, the need to reform a broken system, the need for real police reform, which hold police officers who break the law accountable, the need to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Too many lives, black and white and Latino, have been destroyed because of possession of marijuana. I would take marijuana out of the federal controlled substance act. Look at my economic agenda. Health care for every man, woman, and child is a right. The U.S. joining the rest of the industrialized world, making tuition free public colleges and universities by imposing a tax on Wall Street speculation. If you look at our economic agenda and how it impacts working people, look at our criminal justice record, it is the strongest record out there. Palestinians are human beings, and Palestinians are suffering, and Gaza lies today in ruins. And these are issues that we as Americans have got to deal with. Israel has, I lived in Israel. Israel has absolutely the right not only to exist, but to exist in peace, in security, and free from terrorist attacks. There's no debate about that. But the American government has also got to recognize that Palestinians are suffering as well. Long term, if we're going to bring peace to that region that has seen so much hatred and so much conflict, we are going to have to reach out to both parties. When you have a handful of financial institutions that today have enormous economic and political power, when you have the top 6 financial institutions having assets equivalent to 58% of the GDP of this country, issuing 2/3 of the credit cards, 1/3 of the mortgages, in my view, they are too big to fail. I don't want to see them. I don't want to see us having to bail them out again. And by the way, even forget the risk element. That's just too much power in the hands of too few people. I believe we should break them up. Secretary Clinton does not. Look, I've known Hillary Clinton for 25 years. In campaigns, things get very hot. I've known her. I respect her. But I have been disappointed by the kinds of attacks that her campaign has levied against me. What I have always wanted to see and want to see right now is a debate about our differences on the important issues. And the bottom line here, the major difference that we have is, can you go out and raise huge amounts of money from Wall Street and the most powerful special interest, and then go forward and say to the American people, oh, I'm going to take them on? I think most people don't really believe that that's the case. Every national poll out there now has us defeating Trump by significantly larger numbers than Hillary Clinton is. And that's true for the other Republican candidates as well. So I think a lot of Democrats are going to look out there and say, who is the better candidate to defeat Trump? And the answer is Bernie Sanders.
Senator Sanders drawing huge crowds when he was in New York City, from Coney Island to Washington Square Park. In fact, that Washington Square Park rally attracted thousands of people. The police say more than 11,000. The Sanders campaign says more than 35,000. Either way, these are rallies we have not seen in New York City since another Democratic presidential candidate, Barack Obama, spoke in the Village back in 2007. In that New York primary, by the way, Hillary Clinton defeated the future president. And as we continue on this Sunday morning with Up Close, special edition, Mayor de Blasio joins me in studio as he breaks down the election and responds to some of the Republican candidates who have criticized him. And yes, we'll also talk a little bit about the very large city he runs.